Okay, so this time we're going to have an example on variance analysis. We'll be computing the different variances coming from direct materials, direct labor, and variable overhead. Now, this will be our example, okay? Given the following actual cost and standard costs for 5,000 units, no? Starting with the standard cost, is what are our standard costs? You have direct materials, direct labor, and factory overhead. Okay, so if this product, okay, uses 2 kilograms, okay, per unit, and for each kilograms, okay, is costed at $1.6, okay, so per unit that will be 2, okay, 2 times 1.6, magkano yun? That is going to be 3.2 or 320 per unit. Okay, now for direct labor, for each unit it uses 3 hours and each hour costs $2.50. So you simply multiply these two and you will get 7.5 per unit. Now what about your factory overhead? Okay, this time it's divided into fixed and variable components. Okay, dito it states that, okay, these are your costs at normal capacity. Okay, so na-discuss na natin ang normal capacity sa cost accounting dati. Okay, normal capacity also known as your realistic capacity. Okay, so ang dami pong mga terms niyan. Okay, this is different from your ideal capacity or maximum capacity. Okay po? So, it states that, well, the normal capacity is 16,000 direct labor hours. So, under normal operations, okay, they use 16,000 direct dapat yan. Ayan. Ayan, direct labor. Ayan, direct labor hours. Okay? So, if each unit no uses 3 hours, okay, galing siya dito, siya rin po ito, yan yung basis natin, 3 hours at 1.5, that is going to be 4.5 or 450. And then for your fixed, you have 3 times 0.5, that is going to be 1.5. So as of this point, you will now have your standard cost per unit, which is the total of these 4, and that will be $16.70 per unit. Okay, now normally we compute for this, no? Pag minsan ang binibigay sa atin instead of the rate, okay, we are given the total fixed overhead. Okay, so by working back, if this is actually 50 or 0.5, okay, the rate is actually computed by dividing, okay, by dividing your total fixed, no, total fixed overhead divided by the number of hours, direct labor hours, okay, your denominator hours. Okay, so in this case, since your direct labor hours is already stated at or given at 16,000, okay, 0.5, so this means that your fixed overhead is at 8,000, at $8,000. Okay po, so feel free to ano ba, screen capture, ayan, i-screenshot nyo na lang to kasi babalikan natin itong mga to mamaya. Okay, now for your actual costs, okay, you have the materials at 10,100 kilograms purchased, and out of 10,100 kilograms purchased, okay, only 9,500 kilograms were used. So in this case, as a review, ideally, if your number of materials purchased is equal to the number of materials used, okay, ano ang mangyayari doon? Okay, the total materials variance, okay, the total difference, no, of your actual and standard will be equal to the total materials variances, okay? Divided into materials quantity variance and materials price variance. But in this case, hindi po mag-i-equal yun. Why? Because your units purchased is different from your units used. For your direct labor, they used 15,400 hours at 2.6. Okay, and then for the overhead, these are their costs. Okay, 22,800 for the variable and 8,100 for your fixed overhead. Now, let's compute for your variances. There are different ways on how we can compute for your variances, no? For direct materials, direct labor, also for your variable overhead, we normally divide these into two sets, no, or two groups of variances. Okay, you have the variances that are driven by bakit tayo magpe-pesos? Dollars pala yung example. Ayan. Driven by the price, okay, and the variances that are driven by the cost driver. Tama ba? Driven by the cost driver. Okay, o yung quantity, okay? O kaya yung mga hours natin. Diyan lang naman nakabase yung costs natin, di ba? Kaya siya tinawag na cost variance because it's the difference in the cost. And saan nanggagaling yung difference ng mga costs natin? It comes from the changes in the price, okay, and changes in the quantity. So, changes in the price, dito na po papasok yung ating tinatawag na, for example, in direct materials, this is your price variance. Okay, for direct labor, this is now your rate variance. And for variable overhead variance, this is now your spending. Okay, you now have your spending variance. Okay, pag dito naman in your direct materials, you have your quantity variance. For direct labor, you have your efficiency variance. Same with your variable overhead, no? You have your efficiency variances. Okay, now there are different ways, so let's just review, no? There are different ways on how you can compute for these variances. Okay, so what are these approaches? Okay, so letter A, you can use the formula approach, okay? Or letter B, ito yung pinauso ni Wiley and ni Karen Brooks, no? Okay, so let's just use Wiley's approach. And then letter C, yung matagal na, yung gumagamit tayo ng table. Sabi ng instructor ko noon pa, eto gagawa ka lang ng matrix. Okay, and this one is my favorite. Pero actually pare-pareho lang yung mga components na yan. Okay, the focus is always the change in the price and the change in the quantity. Okay, so paano po ba yung formula na yan? Okay, for example, we're talking about the price variance, rate variance, or spending variance. O, yan. Dito muna tayo. Kapag change, kanyari. Okay, if we're talking about the change in the price, rate, or spending. Normally, this is computed, no? This is computed. Ganyan natin. By multiplying, sabi niya kasi, difference in price, di ba? So, if that is your variance, yan na po yung ating pinaka-clue. That will be the difference of your actual price less your standard price, okay? And you multiply this by, okay, o ano, okay, you have your price that will be multiplied by the actual quantity or hours kung yun ang ginagamit natin, direct labor, and variable efficiency variance. Okay, so ano yung shortcut nito? This is simply the change in price times your actual quantity. Okay. Now, you have to take note that for direct materials, if we are computing for the direct materials price variance, we are going to use the actual quantity price variance, di ba? Actual quantity purchased. Okay. But if we are computing for the direct materials quantity variance, okay, we are going to use the actual quantity used. Yun lang naman yung mga modifications natin sa actual quantity. Okay, pag actual hours, in case of direct labor variance or variable overhead variances, okay, wala pong ganito. Just use the actual hours. Okay, so ayun. Now, if we're computing for the quantity variance, no, quantity variance or efficiency variance, o saan po manggagaling ulit yon? It will come from the change in your quantity or hours. So, eto na po yung clue natin. It will come from the difference, okay, from the difference of the actual quantity minus the standard quantity. Okay, and you multiply that with your standard, ayan, standard price. Okay po. So, ayan. So, kumbaga, basta change in quantity times your standard price. Okay, so that's your formula approach. Okay, kung kay Wiley naman, meron siyang ganitong approach. Okay, sabi niya kasi, your actual cost will be composed of your, for example, no, burahin muna natin yan. For example, we are computing for your direct materials variances. Okay, so sabi niya, it's the difference of the actual cost and standard cost. And actual cost is computed, okay, by multiplying the actual quantity, okay, times the actual price. That's your actual cost. And then, the standard, no, standard cost naman is your standard quantity times, and times your standard price. Okay? And in between, ano po yung ilalagay natin? Okay, kukunin natin yung actual quantity times, yung manggagaling dito, standard price. Okay, so the difference of these two is now your price variance. The difference of these two, this is now your quantity variance. And if you add the two, okay, this is now your total, no? Total variance. That's for your direct materials variance. Ngayon, okay, if we are talking of, let's say, direct labor, no? Direct labor variance. Direct labor variance. Ayan, paano po to? Instead of using actual quantity, you use your actual hours. Okay? And then instead na actual price, o instead na price, you can use your actual rate. Okay? Actual rate. Okay? Ganun din po dito. Okay? And instead of price variance, you will have here your rate variance. And you'll have here your efficiency and efficiency variance. Okay? And you'll get your total direct labor variance. Ganon din po, no? Ganon din po if we are using or computing for your variable overhead variances. Okay po. So, ayun. Now, if you try to use this, di ba, parang formula din yan. Okay? Another way to present this is by coming up with a table. This one is my favorite part. Okay, so paano po yung table na to? Again, this is applicable for variable cost variances, no? Direct materials, direct labor, and variable overhead variance. Okay, so I normally start with the actual and standard. Lagay natin dito. Actual and standard. Na-discuss na natin ito noon. Okay? Since we are talking about costs, okay, we want our actual costs to be lower than your standard. Okay? The lower the actual cost, the better. Siyempre, mas nakatipid tayo. Okay po? So, ganun. Anyway, now talking about cost, sabi natin kanina, dalawa lang naman yung nakakaapekto ng cost. Okay? You have your quantity or hours, and then you will have the price or your rate. Okay? So, madaling intindihin tong approach na to. Actual muna bago standard. O alphabetically arranged yan, di ba? A muna bago S. And then, on your columns, dahil right-handed ako, ganun ako mag-memorize, dahil right-handed ako, nasa right pag nanghihingi ako ng allowance, yung pera. Huwag mong pagbabalik ta rin yan. Okay, so ayun, sulat mo lang yung actual quantity and standard quantity. This is now the difference in your quantity. Okay, not your quantity variance, no? Just the difference in your quantity. Na yun yung gagamitin mo dito pag nagfo-formula ka. Okay po? Okay, and eto, difference in price naman, that's the difference of your actual price and your standard price. Okay, so ayun po siya. And then here, you now have your total actual cost. And then you have your total standard cost. Medyo mali yata. Tama pala. Medyo redundant lang kasi pag hindi pala redundant. Medyo mali. Pag standard kasi normally per unit ang tinutukoy. Okay? Kapag total na yan, hindi na yung total standard. Yun na yung tinatawag natin na budgeted cost. But anyway, this will be your total variance. Ayan. Okay po, your total variance will be the difference of the actual and the standard. Okay, so how do we compute for your variances? Okay, eto po siya. This one, multiplied by the difference in your price, okay, is equal to your price variance. So, di ba? What is your price variance? That's the actual quantity times the actual price, okay, minus actual quantity times standard price. Ang difference lang naman niya ay yung price. Ito actual, ito yung standard. Okay, so yung difference po na to. Okay, times the actual quantity. O, di ba? So, ito po yung actual quantity. Ganun din po doon sa formula natin. You multiply it with your actual quantity. Yun lang naman yung pareho dyan. Okay po. And this one is your quantity variance. Okay, bakit siya quantity variance? Nanggaling siya sa difference ng actual quantity and the standard quantity. Okay, so now, let's continue. The total of these two, if you multiply that, no, and if you add that, you will get your total variance. Now, this is true for variable overhead variance and direct labor variance. For direct materials, that is only true if, in discussion natin kanina, if your actual quantity purchased is equal to your actual quantity used. So, if your actual quantity purchased is different from your actual quantity used, we have to change this. Okay, nagbabago po yan. Okay, so that's for your variable cost variances. Okay, what about your fixed cost? Well, we compute that if we divide or we analyze our cost according to their behavior. Okay, now before we go there, let's review your cost accounting. In your cost accounting, you have your factory overhead variances. Okay, you have your two-way, and then you have your three-way. May four-way pa nga, pero normally two-way at three-way lang. Okay, so what's this two-way and three-way approach? This is, ano ba? This is when you divide your factory overhead variance. You remember your over or under applied. If you divide that into two variances, or do you have two-way? If you divide that into three variances, now you have your three-way variance approach. Okay po? So, ayun. Paano po ba yung two-way at saka three-way? Okay, so, sige, let's try to summarize. What I normally do is to start with the actual cost, and then you have here your applied. Okay? Doon naman nanggagaling yung variances natin eh. How do you compute for your actual? Normally, that is already given. And then, applied naman, this is now your standard hours. You multiply that with your standard rate. Now, in between, naglalagay ako ng dalawa. You have here your, okay, you have here your budgeted actual inputs, okay, and then you have here your, sana tumama to, nakalimutan ko na, budgeted for, if this is the actual, wait, budgeted for actual inputs, and you have the budget for outputs. Outputs achieved. Okay, I'm not a big fan of the formula na afu ba ashar shisher, okay, or afu ba bash shisher. Okay, I prefer this approach because here I have my two-way and my three-way analysis. Okay, so paano po itong budgeted actual inputs? Okay, normally this is computed by, wait lang, your budgeted inputs, I budget for actual inputs, that's your fixed. Okay, this will be composed of your fixed overhead plus your actual quantity times the standard variable rate. Okay, let's try to fix this. Standard variable rate. And for this one, you will have your fixed overhead. Tama ba? Yan, fixed overhead plus, tignan nyo yung difference. Here, I'm going to use the standard quantity kasi outputs yan eh. Okay. Times the standard variable rate. So now I have four components. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, let's try to put this together. Maglagay tayo ng, okay, that's your total factory overhead variance. That's the difference of your actual and your standard or applied. Okay, so you'll get your over or under applied. And then from this point to this point, the difference of the two is your spending. That's now your spending variance. The difference of these two and this point and that point, and these two, this is now your efficiency variance, and this one, this one is now your volume. This one is now your volume variance. So that's your three-way analysis. Okay, now if you add these two, or the difference of actual and your budgeted outputs achieved, that's actually the total spending and efficiency variance. This is now known as your budget variance. So that's now your two-way budget and volume variance. Okay po? Ayan. Now, another way to understand your variances, okay, especially for your factory overhead. Oh, okay. Dito na lang. Your factory overhead variance. This one is easier. Is to divide this into two groups. You have your variable variances, and then you have here your fixed variances. Your variable variances, okay, paano to? Will then be again divided into two. Same with your fixed overhead variances. Okay, for your variable, you will have here your spending variance, and you will have here your efficiency variance. While your fixed overhead, you will have here your budget variance, and you will have here your volume variance. Now if you add these two, okay, and these two, this is known as your controllable variances. Tama ba spelling ko ng controllable? Controllable variance, and these are now your capacity variances. Okay, so if you add that, this is also your factory overhead variances. Dito po nagkakaroon ng dito po tayo nagkakaroon ng four-way variance. How come the three-way variance has method A and method B? Sometimes your variances are not properly dissected. Tama ba yun? Okay, or separated. For example, okay, you have capacity variance and capacity variance and ito hahatiin. Budget variance and spending variance. Or you can have controllable variance, and then you have efficiency and volume variance. So that is your three-way. Okay, or you can start from here, no? You can have variable overhead variance, okay, and then you have the budget and volume variance, okay, or you can have your fixed overhead variance, and then you have your efficiency and spending variance. Okay, so apat na klaseng three-way analysis. That's why most of the time for decision making, okay, and performance evaluation, instead of using three-way, from two-way we go directly to four-way. So from controllable and capacity, you go directly to spending and efficiency, budget and volume. Okay, or from variable and fixed variances, you divide them into spending and efficiency, and then this one you divide them into budget and volume variance. Okay, so now if you have this approach, okay, how do we compute for these variances? Since your variable variances is affected by the quantity or the number of hours, okay, and the price, this variance, spending and efficiency, can be computed using this approach. Okay po. Siya yun, using that approach. So now, what we're going to do is, how are we going to compute for the budget and the volume variance? Okay, so solve na tayo sa variable overhead variances. Let's now focus on fixed overhead variances. Okay. Paano po ito? We can start with your fixed, dito tayo, your actual versus your applied, as usual, applied or standard, and in the middle you have your budgeted. Okay, this one is computed by multiplying the denominator hours. What's the denominator hours again? As a review, this is the number of hours you use to compute for your application rate, which is normally this one, which is normally based on your normal capacity. Okay, so your denominator hours, you multiply that by your standard fixed rate. Here you have your standard hours, you multiply that by your standard fixed rate. Okay po. Okay, so now you have this. That's your total variance, the difference of your applied and your actual. If you want to divide that into 2, this is now your budget variance. And this is now your volume. This is now your volume and volume variance. Okay, so feel free to pause the video, okay, and screen capture kayo. Okay, tapos i-try nyo i-solve yung mga naunang slides, yung examples. Assuming na solve nyo siya, okay, let's try to solve for that. Okay, so where do we start? Okay, balikan natin muna para may pakita ko. So these are our information. Okay, maybe we start with the material variances. Ayan, dito tayo. Let's start with your direct material variances. Okay, so let's try to use the table, yung matrix natin. You have here your actual and your standard. You have here your quantity and you have here the price. Okay, now for our price, the standard price is 1.6. Oops, mali. Okay, standard price is 1.6. Dito tayo, 1.6, while the actual price is 1.65. The standard quantity, okay, the standard quantity is 10,000 units. How did we arrive at the standard quantity? Okay, the standard quantity, based on our information, di ba, we're planning to produce 5,000 units, and each unit will use 2 kilograms. So the standard quantity now will be 10,000 kilograms for our materials. Now, okay, our problem will be on the actual quantity kasi direct materials yan, no? We can use, okay, your actual quantity purchased. Okay, how much is your actual quantity purchased? 10,100. Or we will use the actual quantity used. In this case, 9,500. So when are we going to use this? Okay, we are going to use the actual quantity purchased if we are computing for the price variance. So how do you compute for your direct materials price variance? It will come from the difference in the price. So that's 1.65 minus 1.6. You will get 0.05. As of this point, you already know that this is unfavorable. Why? Because the actual cost is higher than the standard cost. Napagastos tayo. Okay. So, this one, we multiply that with your actual quantity purchased, because this is your price variance. Okay, so this is now 10,100 times 0.05. Okay, so what is 10,100 times 0.05? This is now, magkano yan? 0.5. That's 505. Okay, so 505. Oh, wait lang. Dapat pala dollars yan, no? I forgot. So, this one is $505. Pangit ng sulat eh. $505. Is this favorable or unfavorable? It's unfavorable. Okay? What about your direct materials quantity variance? Oh, because it's quantity variance, we will use the difference in your quantity. And since we are computing for your quantity variance, we're going to use the actual quantity used. So 95 minus 10,000, that will now be 500. Okay, and in this case, it's favorable. Why? Because you use less than what is required, which will result to lower cost. Take note, we're focusing on cost variances. Okay, so nakatipid ka. Okay, that one is favorable. Okay, so we simply multiply that by, ayan, parang espada lang, di ba? Kung right-handed ka, right yung tatanggap ng pera, tapos pag nakahawak ka ng espada, ganyan yung itsura ng espada mo. O pwede mo mga ibura ito eh. Oh, ayan, baluktot na lang. Okay, so let's compute. Okay, we multiply actual quantity, tama? Ay, hindi, tama. Quantity used pala. So you have, no, I'm sorry. It's the price. Dito tayo 1. Na-consider na pala natin siya sa task. Multiply that by 500. Okay. So 1.6 times 500. That will now be 800, which is favorable. And our total variance, okay, your total variance will be how much? This will be, pag tinotal, ay hindi pala dapat ito tinototal, no? Pero sige, i-total na lang natin. That will be minus 500, 300, 295, which is, ayun, which is favorable. Pag may calculator, paki-check na lang. Ayan, i-comment nyo na lang kung ano yung tamang sagot. Now, if, ito yung sinasabi ko eh, kunyari, you multiply this, may makukuha ka dyan. Okay, pag pinag-multiply mo, okay, dapat ito yung total variance natin. It may not be equal to 295 kasi dalawa dito eh. Hindi mo alam kung ano yung gagamitin mo dyan. Diba? And why is it not equal? Because your actual quantity purchased is different from your actual quantity used. Okay. So, let's go to your direct materials. Oh, wait lang. Sir, paano po yung 3-way? Yung 3-way, madali lang yung 3-way. Okay, kung mag 3-way ka, okay, using this approach, ito madali lang. Okay. If this one is given, these are now your variances. This is the difference of your quantity. This is the difference of your price. This will be your price variance. That's one variance. This will be your quantity variance. That's the second. And if you multiply these two, this is now your joint variance. Okay, more to that soon. Anyway, let's go to your direct labor variances. Okay, using the same approach, actual and standard, you have here the hours instead of quantity, and you have here your rate. No. Okay, you have here the rate. Ayan. In dollars para hindi makalimutan. Okay, what is our actual hours? It's at 15,500 400. Okay, and what is our standard hours will be 15,000. Sir, paano po nakuha yung 15,000 na yan? Okay, ganito yan. Since we are planning to produce 5,000 units, and each unit will use 3 hours, you will have 15,000 hours. Okay? Balikan nyo yung info natin. Now, let's go to your rate. What is the actual rate? This one is 2.6. Okay, and the standard rate is 2.5. We can now compute for the difference. This one is 10 unfavorable because this one is higher. Mapapagastos tayo. Okay, and difference of 400, again, it's unfavorable. Mas mahal yung bayad nila, mas mabagal pa silang magtrabaho, di ba? So ayun, you have to investigate that. Malay mo yung materials pala ang problema. Okay, mahirap i-handle yung materials kaya napabagal silang magtrabaho. Anyway, let's continue with the computation. Okay, let's start with ano ba yung maganda? Let's start with your direct labor rate variance. Rate variance, the difference in the rate times your actual hours. Okay, so that will be times 0.1. Okay, sulat natin, times 0.1 or 0.10, you will get 1,540, which is unfavorable. Okay, for the direct labor efficiency variance, okay, you will have, ayan, diba? 2.5 times 400. So what is now 2.5 times 400? You will get 1,000, also unfavorable. Oh, yan na, parang espada lang. Now, if you add this, you will get 2,540 unfavorable. That's your total direct labor variance. Let's try to check. Okay, so you multiply that. Kunyari na multiply mo na, you will get 2,540 na unfavorable. Okay, so those are your variances. Okay, let's go to your variable overhead variances. Oh, ganun din. Dahil variable cost siya, you have here your actual, you have here your standard, and you have here the number of hours, and you have here your rate. Okay. So, paano po ito? Ayan. Then you have here the difference. Hindi ko kabisado magkano na yung actual hours natin. Pareho lang sila ng direct labor. 15,400, and this one is 15,000. Now, what about our actual rate and our standard rate? Your standard variable rate is, dito nga tayo. Can you compute for the standard variable rate? You have, and it's already given at 1.5. So let's try to put that. It's 1.5. Okay. So what about your actual rate? Okay, you can actually divide, wait lang, nasan po ba yung, nasan ba yung ating alt tab? Ayun, okay. So we can now compute for your actual rate kung given yan, di ba? How much is the actual cost? The actual cost is 22,800. Ne? Pahiya na naman ako. 22,800. We divide that by 15,400 actual hours. So our rate is 1.48. Okay, so gamitin natin yung 1.48 na yan. Right. 1.48. Okay. So difference will be 0.02. Mukhang meron tayong konting problema dito kasi nag-round off tayo. You have 0.02 and difference here will be 400. Okay po. So ayan, paano po ito? Ilagay nga natin, ang total nito is, magkano na yung actual kanina? 22,800 and 15,000 times 1.5, that's 22,500. Okay, so dapat ang difference dito ay eksaktong 300. 300, which is unfavorable. Now let's see if this will work, no? This and that. Okay, so you have now your, okay lang naman pag magkamali para ma-check natin. This will now be your spending variance. 15,200 times 0.02. Okay. Wait lang. Naku, bakit ayaw na ng calculator ko? Ayun. Okay, so kung hindi sana tayo nag-ground off, malamang magiging exact yan. Pero dahil nag-ground off tayo, iba po yung kalalabasan nito. Okay, so bakit tayo nandito? Wait lang. Ayun. Dito po tayo. Hindi na kaya ng powers ko ang mag. Okay, so you have 15, no. 15,400, di ba? Times 0.02 equals, you have 308. So that is now our spending variance. Okay, sige, let's write that down. 15,400 times 0.02. Okay, so you will have 300. Ayun. 308. Which is, this one is favorable. Okay, that's favorable. What about your efficiency variance? This is your efficiency variance. 400, okay, times 1.5. And this is 600. Oh, this one is unfavorable. Okay, so if you add the total, if you add your variances, you will get ganun dapat, pero hindi. Ayan, you will have 200, 290, 292, which is unfavorable. Okay, now, itry nyo nga. What if nag-memory in ka lang? Okay, nag-memory in ka lang. Buo kaya yung kalalabasan. Okay, so pag ganito, you have another approach naman. There are different ways to compute this. Okay, you have here your actual. Gamitin natin yung alternative approach. You can use your actual and then you compare that with your budgeted for actual output And then you have here your budgeted, yan, budgeted output, budgeted, budget for output achieved. Okay, so in this case you will have 15,400 hours times 1.5, and based on output yung standard natin, ganun lang yun, that's your standard hours times 1.5. Yun lang naman yung difference. So our actual is 22,800. This one 15.4 times 1.5. Na-compute ko na to kanina. It's 23,100. And this one will be 22,000. Okay. 22,500. The difference of these two is now, yan. Okay, magkano po yung difference nito? This is now your spending. Spending variance. And this one is 300. Which is favorable. Okay? Now, dito naman, this is now what you call your, ano yung tawag natin dito? Efficiency. Ako, mabagal na yung computer ko. Ayan, efficiency variance. And the difference of these two is, magkano yan? Ayan. 600. Naku, na-delay yung change ng kulay. You now have 600 na unfavorable. And the difference is, or the total is 300. Okay po? Ayun. Now, what about your fixed overhead? Sulat natin. Yan. What about your fixed overhead? Okay, so yung approach natin kanina, you have here your actual, and then you have here your budgeted, and you have here your applied. Okay, so what is the actual? It's 8,100. We have a budget of 8,000, and we have applied of standard hours. You multiply that by 0.5, your standard rate. Tama po? Okay, so this is now your budget variance. Okay, so how much is your budget variance? You now have 100 na unfavorable. And this one, okay, this is now known as your volume variance. 15 times 0.5, this is 7,000. Ayun, 7,500. So you have 500 na difference, okay, which is unfavorable. Okay, so actual, standard, or applied, okay, or ano, magkano po yung total dito? Wait lang, matama pala. You now have 600 as your total fixed overhead. Okay, so ayun, now to reconcile, kasi ang dami, sir, okay lang yung direct materials at ano, okay lang yung direct materials and direct labor. Our problem is the overhead, no? The factory overhead variance. Okay, so if, sige, isulat natin. Ayan, factory overhead variance. Kung magto 2-way, 3-way ka, you can have here your actual. Tapos ano na nilalagay ko dito? Ayan. You have the budgeted for, ayan, the budget amount ayun, for actual inputs, based on actual inputs. And then here you have your budget for, or based on outputs. Yan. Outputs achieved. Tapos applied yata. Or standard. Syempre. Okay? So let's try to compute. Your actual is 30,900. Saan po nagaling 30,900? Given po yan. Variable of 22,800. Sige na, sulat ko na. Okay, variable of 22,800. That's your variable. And you have a fixed cost of 8,100. So that is now your fixed. Okay? Now your budget for actual inputs, that will now be ayan, 8,000. Okay, for your fixed, no, plus the value of 15,400, the actual hours, you multiply that by 1.5. Okay, yung standard variable rate natin, and you will get, parang na-compute ko to kanina, it's 31,100. Here, you will have 8,000. That's the fix. You now add your variable, but this time it's based on the standard, no, times 1.5. Here you will get 30,500. And applied, alam na ninyo to, you have 15,000 standard hours times your standard rate, which is 2. So, sana naman nanggaling yung 2 na yan. Earlier, we computed this, no? This one is your variable, which is 1.5. Okay, and the fixed, which is 0.5. Okay, variable and fixed. Okay. Ayan, so, anong gusto nyo? Kunyari, mag-three-way analysis tayo. Okay, your three-way analysis will be composed of your spending, okay, which is the difference of these two. Okay, aside from that, you will have your efficiency. Okay, and the difference of this is now your volume variance. Okay, so 39 versus 31,900, that will be 30, magiging 100, 200. You will now have 200, which is favorable. Nakatipid kasi tayo. Efficiency is the difference of these two. Wait lang, lagay nga natin yan. Okay. Ito, it's the difference of this one and that one. 31,100 versus 30,500. That will be, magkano yung dadagdag ko dito? 500, 600. So you will now have 600, which is unfavorable dahil mas malaki ito kaysa dun sa standard. Okay. Now, for your volume variance, from that point to that point, okay, this one is 30,000 pala. Okay, so sulat natin 30,000. Alright, so the difference will be 500, which is unfavorable. So that's now your three-way. Okay, what if mag two-way ka lang? Okay, kapag two-way analysis lang tayo, it will start from this point and you skip natin yan, no? to this point. And this will now be called your budget variance. That is now your budget variance. Your total budget variance will be yung kano to. Ayan. 400 na unfavorable. Okay. And then dito, ganun pa rin. You still have your volume variance. Okay, which is 500 na unfavorable. Okay. So, ayun. What are the common questions here, sir? How come your budget variance, yeah, let's try to reconcile. How come your budget variance using this approach is 400 while using the earlier approach, your budget variance is 100? Dito kasi, we're just talking of your fixed overhead budget variance. This one is your factory overhead budget variance. Okay po. So, ayun. Now, another way to reconcile that, no? If, for example, let's say you have here your variable overhead variance. How much is our variable overhead variance? The total of the two. 400 unfavorable plus 500 unfavorable, that will be 900 unfavorable, right? 30,900 minus 30,000. Okay, so ilagay natin dito. It's 900 na unfavorable. Now, there are different ways on how we can divide this. Sabi natin, you can divide this as to whether they are variable or fixed. Okay, dito tayo. How much is your total fixed overhead variance? 100 unfavorable and 500 unfavorable. So that's now 600 unfavorable. Okay, so we are looking for 600 na unfavorable. While for your variable, okay, it was already computed, it's 300 unfavorable. Okay, so ilagay natin dito, it's 300 unfavorable. Okay, so or kung alam mo yun and given yung isa sa kanila, work back ka lang. Okay, pwede yun. Next, let's try to divide this or dissect this further into spending, efficiency variance. You have here your budget variance and you have here your volume variance. Okay, now since our variances are divided as to cost behavior, dito tayo sa approach na to, no? So your spending will be 300 favorable, efficiency will be 600 unfavorable. Okay, so 300 na favorable, while this one is 600 unfavorable. Now for your fixed, you have 100 unfavorable budget and 500 unfavorable volume. Okay, 100 unfavorable budget and 500 unfavorable volume. Now if you add these two, you will have here your controllable variance. Your controllable variance is now, magkano to? 200 favorable. Okay. Now, this one is now your capacity variance. Okay, which is 600 unfavorable plus 500 unfavorable. That's 1,100 unfavorable. Now, if you add this, dapat ang total niya pa rin will be equal to your factory overhead variance, which is in this case 900 na unfavorable. Okay po. So, ayun. So, now it's easier to reconcile. Okay, so, sir, ano to? Actually, if you use your two-way analysis, another way to understand controllable variance is your spending variance. Ito yung tinatawag natin na spending variance in some books. Now, I don't want to use spending variance kasi baka ma-misinterpret siya na ito. Okay? So, ayun. And then, your capacity variance, this is actually divided into, wait lang. Spending variance, this is also known as the efficiency. Tama ba? Yes. Efficiency and volume variance. And volume. Under three-way. Okay, so spending efficiency plus volume. Diba? Ito yung hinati natin kanina. Using this approach. Spending, efficiency, and volume. Ayun, spending, tara! Spending, efficiency, and volume, which is composed of, ayan, pag bumalik ka dito, yun yung total budget variance mo. Okay. In this case, your budget variance is 400. Okay, pero yung budget variance mo dito ay 100. So, yan. Okay, so that's how you reconcile your variances. Okay po, so I guess that's it, okay, for this session. Ayan. Thank you very much.